a plan monitored just off the flight deck. Once an FA-18 touches down, it becomes the responsibility of the handler.
Heads up around the island, pulling out a prop. Heads up around 643.
The handler keeps track of the plane's position and uses a complicated set of push pins and buttons to update each plane's status. The aircraft templates are exactly to scale, even down to the area a helicopter's props take up when spinning. Precision like this is essential, as the slightest miscalculation in timing or aircraft size could cause a deadly mishap. One of the most important jobs is to monitor when a jet is low on fuel. Before an FA-18 can be cleared for launch by the handler, its tanks have to be filled. Fueling and defueling the jets is a specialized task handled by a meticulously trained crew. And they're kept busy with the FA-18s, which consume massive amounts of fuel, also known as JP5. One criticism of the FA-18 is that it has a relatively small onboard fuel capacity of 1,600 gallons. To increase its range, it can carry 3 external tanks.
You've got 3 drop tanks, which holds about 330 gallons worth of fuel, or 2,200 pounds. So just by adding those 3 tanks, we increase our fuel load by 6,600 pounds. We add the drag, but the amount of gas that we get outweighs the drag of pushing those through the air.
Including its internal tanks, the FA-18 carries roughly 2,500 gallons of JP5. On a regular patrol, it can use almost all its fuel in just an hour and 45 minutes. And FA-18s really burn through their fuel on takeoff, and when they need sudden acceleration from their afterburners. The blast from an FA-18's afterburners is so hot, the protective jet blast diffractors on the flight deck are made of reinforced concrete, as metal would simply melt.
With the afterburner, the hot gases that leave the turbine section are incredibly hot, so by throwing just fuel onto those hot gases, right, you get an instantaneous ignition. By opening these turkey feather nozzles, you allow those gases to leave at a very rapid rate, which results in a tremendous burst of acceleration. If I plugged in the afterburners, I'd probably be out of fuel in about 15 to 20 minutes.
To keep the FA-18's hungry engines well fed, the carrier needs to keep a large supply of JP5 on hand. There's so much fuel on board, it serves as ballast to steady the ship and keep the flight deck level. Over a 6-month period, a carrier's planes can burn through almost 12 million gallons of JP5. To keep the jets fully fueled, the carrier rendezvous with a supply ship every 7 to 10 days. Fully fueled and operational, a carrier's FA-18 squadrons can fly over 100 sorties per day. On mission, or as pilots say, in country, the first order of business for FA-18s is to defend against air-to-air targets. This is what's known as dogfighting, and it's an arena in which the FA-18 has proven highly successful. Close combat is a modern duel to the death, and dogfight training is among the most intense phases of learning how to fly the FA-18.
What I'm going to try to do is to stay on your tail as best I can today.
At NAS Lemoore, trainees have to take on their instructors to earn their FA-18 certification.
We will get ourselves to the appropriate...
Lieutenant Commander Mike Bossard is in charge of the fighter weapons phase of FA-18 training. Today, he is training a former Tomcat pilot how to effectively maneuver the FA-18 in every dogfight scenario.
And once I get to the appropriate range, I'm going to call either a missile shot or I'm going to call fights on. So if you ever lose sight of me today, just look right at your 6 o'clock position and I'll probably be right there.
Or you hope so.
What do you say we go out there and have some fun?
Sounds good.
The dogfighting stage marks roughly the halfway point in FA-18 training, combining what trainees learned in class with high-G maneuvering. This is also the time when new pilots first challenge their instructors. Their game faces on, teacher and student prepare to square off. Before takeoff, the pilots personally ensure their jets are in working order. For the high-speed maneuvers of dogfighting, pilots need to be certain their jet will perform flawlessly under even the heaviest G-forces. All flaps, ailerons, and stabilizers are tested. The dogfighters taxi out, and the duel begins. When they're on the offensive, pilots need to stay on the tail of their adversary and lock on target.
Trigger down, snap.
Defensive maneuvering requires severe G-turns and sudden escape moves.
Right. I got sight. Knock it off.
In the last exercise, the trainee proves his mettle, turning the tables and getting on his instructor's tail.
That was sneaky. See ya.
But he must still complete weeks of additional weapons training before he is certified to drop live ordnance. Among the FA-18's most lethal air-to-air weapons is the Raytheon AMRAAM, or Advanced Medium-Range Air-to-Air Missile. The AMRAAM is capable of being launched at well beyond visual ranges, in any weather, day or night. Its low-smoke, high-impulse rocket motor reduces the chance of enemy sighting and evasion, while its 45-pound warhead can take out any plane in existence. The AMRAAM's self-contained active radar seeker allows the FA-18 pilot to maneuver immediately after launch without disrupting the missile's path to its target. Just as deadly as the AMRAAM is the AIM-9X Sidewinder. The Sidewinder's strength is for shorter ranges than the AMRAAM. Its tracking device features a 180-degree periscope-like infrared seeker that can spot and chase targets. The AIM-9X earned the name Sidewinder with its vectoring rocket motors, which allow right-angle turns. Pilots fire and sometimes even steer these weapons from the FA-18's cockpit. What makes these weapon systems all the more lethal is a cockpit design with a heads-up display that allows the pilot to perform many functions without looking down. And almost every task a pilot needs to perform can be done without having to take his hands off the controls.
Well, the biggest thing to note is hands-on throttle and stick, or HOTAS. I mean, everything you can do everything with just with your fingers while they're on the stick and throttle. Where the Tomcat, it was more user-intensive. Had to push a lot of buttons, take your hands off the throttle, or take your hands off the stick to do certain things. And in the front of the Tomcat, you had very limited capability as far as what kind of radar modes you were in and what kind of stuff you could do. The Hornet, from the front, you basically can do everything.
With the FA-18's advanced cockpit design and fly-by-wire control system, the pilot has more flexibility than in any other Navy jet.
What this aircraft becomes when you go airborne, or even prior to going airborne, it becomes more or less an extenuation of your actual body. I mean, you become a part of this jet, you become one with the jet. What these displays allow you to do is find a mechanism or a conduit through which you can best glean all that information off, and you can incorporate that into your decision-making process while you're airborne. You get very comfortable hopping into this thing, starting it up, and launching off the front end of the carrier with it.
To get this comfortable with their planes, future FA-18 pilots spend over 50 hours in a flight simulator at NAS Lemoore. It recreates almost exactly the cockpit and flight characteristics of the FA-18. This state-of-the-art equipment enables air crews to virtually fly every scenario.
We'll initially start our training here with just basic flight procedures, and as the training progresses, we'll learn different weapon systems, how to fight the airplane air-to-air, and how to use it air-to-ground. And eventually, we'll end up flying at the boat with this.
The final test that future Hornet pilots face in the simulator prepares them for one of the most difficult tasks in naval aviation: landing on the deck of an aircraft carrier.
The minute you take off until you get on the carrier, that's all you're thinking about is that landing. You can't replicate that. The simulator does the best you can, but there isn't the feeling of fear, the feeling of death, or the excitement, or the adrenaline. It doesn't come through your system in the simulator. But what this will do is give you muscle memory. When the adrenaline does start pumping through your body and the excitement, you start thinking about what you did in the simulator.
After simulated carrier landings, pilots get even closer to the real thing. This is Lemoire's landing signal area, complete with arresting cables, distance markers, and even the identical landing lights pilots use as a guide to touch down on the carrier successfully.
Here at NAS Lemoire on runway 32 left at the just outside the LSO shack. Behind me you can see the optical landing system, the Fresnel lens, which provides the pilot a optical reference for how high or low he is below glide slope, and that's real important because the plane has to land at the proper spot on the carrier. The LSO, landing signal officer, he stands at the back of the boat, and he's in verbal communication with the pilots via the radio. But he also uses this, the pickle. This controls the lens. Pushing this button illuminates the red wave-off lights. So that would indicate that the landing area is fouled, like there's another aircraft in there, or personnel. And also the cut lights here, you can give them by using the cut lights, it's another non-verbal way that the LSO can communicate to the pilot that he wants them to give a little bit of power to come up on glide slope a little bit.
The runway at Lemoire's Reeves Field stretches for 13,500 feet, giving pilots plenty of landing room. On a Nimitz-class carrier, the landing strip is just 500 feet long. To bring an FA-18 to a complete stop, the pilot has to grab or trap one of 4 arresting cables. That means dropping the plane into a 40-foot box, ideally just 2 feet in front of the wire. Without some sort of arresting device, the jet would skid right off. Dropping 800 feet in just 15 seconds, the pilots have to keep the plane's nose up and maintain the correct attitude or angle of descent. Flying in at a minimum of 150 knots to avoid engine stall, FA-18 pilots aren't so much landing the plane as aiming it at the wire. As soon as he touches down, the pilot revs his engine in case he slips the wire. If he misses, he takes off, circling around to try again. During the day, the pilot can at least see the deck. At night, the carrier turns off all but a few lights to avoid becoming an easy target for enemies. Liquid vapor torches cast just small pools of light. The rest of the flight deck remains as dark as possible. From 3 miles away, the carrier looks like a pinprick of light. There's no way to tell which direction it's moving, and a fatigued pilot's eyes can easily play tricks on him. Pilots returning at night have often been aloft on missions as long as 6 hours. The extra fatigue leads to a greater chance of missing the wire.
You're fatigued. You've had a lot of excitement, adrenaline high, adrenaline low, probably hungry, tired, all that. At night, you don't really look at the carrier except for maybe the last 10 seconds of the approach or something like that. It's just an instrument approach. You have a set of needles, one for lineup, one for glide slope, and you're just keeping those things centered up. Like magic, there's the boat, and you just fly a touchdown. So it's all instrument work, pretty much. And if you keep that thing centered and you keep the attitude on the jet, then you'll grab a 3-wire every time.
Day and night, FA-18s and other planes are watched closely in the Air Traffic Control Center, a miniature version of what exists at any major airport. At the very top of the tower, the air boss directs the landings and takeoffs. From his perch, the air boss oversees pilot landings on the aft of the flight deck, as well as launches on the middle 2 catapults. His assistant, the mini-boss, oversees the front, where the two most active catapults are. All information about the carrier's FA-18s from launch to landing goes through the air boss. It's his job to deal with information, occasionally jotting notes on the wall and windows to keep it straight. He then relays the critical information to wherever it needs to go. The air and mini-boss are both aviators. This way they know every procedure intimately and immediately understand a pilot's status. Even the captain of the carrier is an aviator, highlighting the role of the aircraft carrier as a floating airbase. The FA-18's central role on the carrier is clear from the top of the tower to deep into its belly. This is one of the ship's 40-plus weapons magazines, where crews prepare the FA-18's various weapons loads.
What we're doing today is configuring two Mark 83 low-drag bombs, utilizing a parachute-type fin assembly. What they're going to be doing now is they're going to hoist the bombs up on the bomb table.
This 1,000-pound ordnance is a dumb bomb, just one weapon in the FA-18's arsenal. The FA-18 can be configured to carry over 24 different bombs and missiles. Once the FA-18's bombs are assembled, they ride a series of elevators to the flight deck. Here, the ordnance comes under the control of weapons inspectors. They wheel the bombs over by hand before attaching them to the FA-18's pylons. For all the high-tech gadgetry surrounding the FA-18, some tasks still come down to raw muscle power. Although the bomb is not yet armed, it does contain almost 1,000 pounds of explosives. In past carrier disasters, fires have ignited the aviation fuel, which then set off the bombs. Today's bombs have extra insulation so that they can withstand short periods of extreme heat or fire. The last step is to add the fuse. The final arming of the bomb takes place only after the plane takes off. From inside the FA-18 cockpit, pilots throw a switch, activating them. Dumb bombs are just a small part of the FA-18 strike-ready arsenal. For precise ground support, they include the latest laser and GPS-guided weapons.
Everything we're doing in country is precision-guided munitions. In other words, a laser-guided bomb or a bomb that goes to precision coordinates on the ground.
One of the FA-18's most lethal air-to-ground weapons is the JSOW. A large precision strike weapon, the JSOW affixes to the FA-18's middle wing weapon station. Once launched, it releases two wing structures that allow the missile to glide toward its target. Skimming just a few feet above the ground, the JSOW releases powerful cluster bombs that can destroy multiple targets in one strike. Equally lethal, but with different capabilities, is the HARV, or high-speed anti-radiation missile. Accurately hitting targets from well beyond visual ranges, HARV destroys enemy radar before the FA-18 can even be detected. The FA-18 can also be equipped with Maverick, SLAM, and Shrike missiles, as well as a host of guided and unguided bombs. The highlight of air-to-ground weapons training is when FA-18 pilots learn what it's like to drop real live ordnance. Flying missions over remote testing areas, pilots take full control of the FA-18's precision strike capabilities, pinpointing designated targets and releasing fully armed bombs. Known as Live Day, This is when new Navy pilots experience for the first time the destructive air-to-ground capabilities of the FA-18. What makes the FA-18's weapons so lethal is the latest in targeting technology. Carrier-based Hornet squadrons increasingly employ deadly accurate infrared systems.
This is a forward-looking infrared pod that the Navy F-18 carries, and what we do with that thing is now we are able to look via that sensor onto the ground to a specific target point, find a building, maybe even an urban environment. Now I can turn on some laser energy withheld in that pod, laser designate that target, and now my laser-guided bomb goes to that laser energy, and now I get a probability of impact within about 13 feet.
FA-18s also track targets using highly advanced radar technology, housed in the nose of the plane. These unique systems allow the pilot to switch between air-to-air and air-to-ground modes with a push of a button. Integrated into an electronic network, the FA-18 takes on a central role in frontline operations. Through satellite data link, the radar, map, and weapons displays of the FA-18 cockpit can be seen by fellow aircrew, as well as commanding officers in the carrier strike group. The frontline FA-18 becomes the eyes and ears of an integrated battlefield. And with each updated model, the FA-18 grows more sophisticated. At Lemoore, the latest class has spent 9 months preparing for battle. As they set out for the fleet, the most recent graduates take control of the next generation of FA-18, the Super Hornet. The Super Hornet design is based on the original FA-18, but it is an even more lethal machine. The Super Hornet is almost 3 feet longer and has a 25% larger wing surface than the A through D models. Its structural differences include diamond-shaped intakes and a dog-tooth wing design. The bigger, stronger Super Hornet holds 35% more internal fuel capacity and contains extra space for future technologies. On its longer wings, the Super Hornet can support 2 additional weapon stations or fuel tanks.
Well, of course, the F-18 has smart technology built into almost all of the weapon systems. Almost all of the hardpoint pylons and launchers are smart technology, so they're capable of carrying the most sophisticated weapons. The airplane actually covers a lot of the functions, allowing the pilot to really concentrate on the mission at hand. It's a great aircraft. The lethality is awesome.
Bigger, more capable, and with room to grow, the Super Hornet promises to take on an even greater role than the earlier model FA-18s.
Really what we get out of the Super Hornet is the capability to draw from more advanced technologies, and then also the stuff that was designed for the Super Hornet backfitted. And again, it's that complementary thing where the A through C and the E and F Super Hornet just complement each other and make our carrier decks a lot more lethal than they had been in the past.
The Super Hornet is being modified to fill almost every role on the carrier, from electronic jamming to refueling. The carrier air wing of the future will be made up of a lethal and effective team of FA-18s.
The majority of the missions on the aircraft carrier are going to be accomplished by a Hornet. How important is that to the military? It allows us a quickly deployable force to be able to handle virtually any scenario.
But its heart will always be that of a fighter. And as one of the most lethal weapons aloft, the FA-18 will be defending the skies for decades into the future.